It's 32 days on our 1962 Chevy pickup for Eric. I'm going to show you how to finish off this bodywork here on the hood and on the quarter panel, so stay tuned. And this time when we sand down, we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. I'm going to use my large wheel here, but I'm just going to do it very gingerly, just kind of to break off this hard crust right here. It's really pretty hard to sand through this first layer crust. And then we're just going to gingerly sand down. What we don't want to happen is we don't want to sand it past the point of even. Because if you get a little divot in there, then you're just going to have to sand it down some more. You're going to have to put another skim coat on it, or you're going to have to shoot primer on there fat. And of course, if you shoot primer on there fat, it's more likely to crack. So we want to have the thinnest amount of filler, the thinnest amount of primer, etc., so that we don't have any problems in the future. So when we're sanding this, we're going to start with this big 80 grit disc. I'll do a little bit with the DA sander with 80 grit. I'll switch to 80 grit block sander and sand it down. And then we'll go with 150, then we go 220, then we go 320. You can go 400, 500, 600 if you like. This is just a nice, decent daily driver, so we're not getting that crazy with it. And if we're doing a show job, then we do this a bit differently too. I used to do all this stuff by hand, but I'm getting a little bit old and I can't take that no more. So watch along. When you put on a new pad, you take the old pad and you fold it in half, and then you can use it on corners and stuff. And when you have a new pad, the teeth on here are nice and fresh. So when you use those in your large open areas first, if you use them on corners and round areas, they get worn off faster. So this doesn't actually have that much large open area. It'd be more pertinent on the quarter panel. You would do the large flat mass first, and then you'd round your corners. So remember not to go too far, because you still have to do the 150, the 220, the 320, the 400. If you sand this even, then when you're doing your 150 and etc., then you're actually sanding into a shallow situation. So you want to keep it high and above, and when you hit 320, 400, that's when you want it at the very last even plane. You can see I got a shallow spot right here, and this shallow spot's going to be below our even plane, our straightest line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sand this down a little bit more aggressively. We're going to shallow it out just a little bit. We're going to put another thin skim coat of filler on here. And you'd think to yourself, well, geez, Dave, that's just a small little spot there. Why don't you just hit that and just let it be? Reason being for that is if I just do this small spot, it's more likely to show up in the future. So when we are going to be doing this, we're going to do it just like we did the times before. We're going to do it a little bit shallow, and then we're going to go ahead and put in the thin skim coat on top, so that our final coat is one nice solid piece. Another thing you see me doing is I crisscross as much as possible, meaning I go one direction like this and then I come back the other direction. The reason that I'm doing that is if you were to take your sandpaper and continually sand in the same grooves, it'd take you longer. So what you do is you sand one way and you get your groove set up like this, then you come by in a crisscross pattern and you just chop the tops of those off. Now your grooves are going this way, now you'll come across and you'll chop the tops of those off. So crisscrossing gives you a more even sanding, and it gives you quicker sanding, because God knows you don't want to be doing this any longer than you gotta. So I know you might be thinking, damn Dave, that's a lot of Bondo. But keep in mind that we're just putting on a very thin skim each time we're doing this, because if you put it on fat, it's more likely to crack. And if you're doing a car and you're just selling it, you're going to go smash it up in the derby or whatever, you don't have to do all these steps. Just put on a big fat ass coat of Bondo and let it dry and sand it down and be done with it. If you find any low spots, stick a little bit there, and you know, that's about that on that. But if you're doing a little bit higher end job, if you're going to be keeping it for a lot of years, and you don't want to have to fix the cracks later, then you're going to have to go through the steps now. When you get a little bit of filler in little grooves where the seams join, make sure that you take the filler out now when it's nice and soft, because it's a real drag when it's hard.
so at first glance this looks good. It's nice, it's flat, it's even, blah blah blah. But we still have some minor low spots like here, and I think one little tidbit in here. And right here, I don't know if the camera picks it up or not, but there is the first layer of Bondo we put on, and then the skim coat is shining through that. So here we've got multiple layers of Bondo. We don't want that. We just want one nice sheet. So if you were just doing a nice quickie truck, then this would actually be okay. You could put primer sealer on these here where there's varying Bondo layers, but it's best to have one nice thin thing on there. So what you kind of want to think about it is like you're putting on a thin layer of primer, for instance. You know, if you saw a low spot when you were doing this primer, and you just pack the primer on, of course, but that's not good because it might crack. So think of this as just spreading on your primer instead of spraying it on.
So this had enough time to dry off, pretty much. Well, let me check it. It's always good to get a trap, a water trap, just before your tool. You also want to have several, of course, coming from the compressor, but one last one just before the tool, so that we make sure we don't get any water spitting and splitting onto this. And sometimes I'll have oil too, and I'll really jack your paint up. So now I'll switch to 150, and I'll bring this down a little bit more. We need to make sure that our boards are clean each time. If you've got a little tuffet of dust that have built up, then you'll get kind of a drag in that one section, and it'll mar up the area. These are really nice sanding blocks here. They've got these little metal rods that go in and out. You take the metal rods out, it gives it more flexibility. Put the metal rods in, and it's stiffer. And that is beneficial where you've got contours, of course, like fenders and such. This is made by AFS in Minnesota, USA. Their phone number is 651-459-7167. So I really like these things. They're lightweight. The other ones that are wooden, they're good, but they're heavy. These save you a lot on your back. So AFS, if you're watching, send me some more, man. can see I still got some low spots going on, and I'm starting to sand with a 150. One of the hardest things to do when you're doing this is not to sand it even with whatever sandpaper you're sanding it with, be it 150 or 80 grit. Once you sand it even, all your subsequent sandings are going below the fine line. So don't get too carried away, and take it nice and slow. Large, flat, long areas, you want to use the longest sanding board that you can, and then you want to step down to a smaller one where you've got a contour in like this. When you got a line like this, you kind of want to sand that last, so to speak. So I never try to round it off. I want to try to keep that as crisp and straight and clean as possible. It'll be easier to see if I do it that way. If I try to round it off too soon, then it'll be a little bit harder to keep the shape. If you're having problems with a line like this, another trick to do is just get some tape and then just tape the line on here. Just sand one side, put the tape on the other side, then sand the other side. Do that a couple of times and you'll have it pretty straight. So I'll get this sanded down just a little bit more with a 150, and I won't worry about rounding off this edge here until I'm probably using 220 or 320. Now I'm going with 220, and you can see I'm kind of expanding my area where I'm sanding. When you're sanding this stuff right here, occasionally you'll slip back and you'll get something over here. So when we're doing this, we've got to kind of work our way out and make sure that we get any scratches that might have gone random. I don't know if this shows up on camera or not, but you can see the line right here is nice and straight and clean. So now I can think about rounding it off. Okay, now I'm going with a 320. Okay, so now I'm going to take some 400 grit on a DA sander, and this will be my last kind of thing here. So the reason I do this is, let's say for instance when I was sanding with a 320, a little bit of grit got in there or something like that, and there was a scratch in there. I really wouldn't see that, and the 320 scratches might also be phantoming in there. But a DA would do very small circles, so where a long scratch might show up, a little circular one's a lot less likely to. Alright, so everywhere we've got bare metal, we're going to shoot some self-etching primer. The reason that we do that is that the primer bites into the metal, and it whites into the surrounding paint and the Bondo at the same time. And then we can put on our filler primer. If you put on just filler primer over bare metal, some filler primers won't stick to bare metal. So you need an acid etch, self-etching primer first, or an epoxy primer, and then you can go ahead and shoot your filler primer on top of that. Guess we'll let that dry up for a bit. Meanwhile, we'll go work on our quarter panel. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to leave you guys here though, because it's so hot out there. The camera's overheating. But all you're gonna do is see me doing the same thing you saw me do here. But I'll show you the results a little bit later. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but you can just faintly see the metal that's coming up underneath here. So we call that a shiner when we hit our metal. And we don't want shiners, especially when we're doing our 80 grit sanding. We don't really want to see any shiners until maybe we hit 220 or so, 320. So anywhere I see a shiner right now, I just stay away from. So I already know this is too close, but I'm not getting any shiners up here, any shiners down here. So I know I still got to sand some more here and here, but not here. So I can tell by the way my high-low spots are showing up that it's a little bit higher in this area, and it's obviously a little bit lower right here. So I'm going to work this area a little bit lower until I can get it a little more even across the board. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot some fill primer on here. I've noticed that the rattle cans, Because they don't actually work that good. They gum up the sandpaper a lot. What you have to do is just shoot it on with really, really light coats. Give it a lot of time to dry, and you put another coat on. But don't shoot the coats fast because it'll just mud up your sandpaper quick.